Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very, very much. Good evening, everybody. It's a great honor for me to serve on CEPA's International Leadership Council, and I want to pay tribute to all of you for everything you are doing to help keep the war in Ukraine firmly in our minds. But I've got to tell you that after 2.5 years of bloodshed, I'm afraid that Western policy is starting to look not just can you hear me? Is not just starting to look inadequate, but actually cruel, because we are willing the end, but failing to deliver the means. I'm going to give the award in just a minute, but just hear this message. We constantly hail the heroism of the Ukrainians, but we force them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs. We tell them that we will be with them for as long as it takes, without recognizing how that phrase, as long as it takes, now makes them groan whenever they hear it. And we tell them that their fight is our fight, and they're fighting for universal values of freedom and democracy, without understanding that if we really mean those slogans, then we should be doing what is necessary to help them now to win, not just to survive, but to defeat Putin and to preserve Ukraine as a free, independent, and sovereign European country. Because that is the only tolerable outcome. And if, as people increasingly suggest, this war were now to be frozen with a partitioned Ukraine and Russia still permanently capable of threatening, if not invading, what is left of that country, it would be a total disaster for all of us. It would be a disaster for all the other countries on the periphery of the old Soviet Union. It would be a disaster for all those who believe the boundaries should not be changed by force, whether in Europe or in the South China Sea. It would be a total humiliation for the NATO alliance that has kept us all safe for more than 75 years, and it must not be allowed to happen. And to ensure a Ukrainian victory, we must now, in the next few months, decisively change the calculations in the Kremlin. And we need to make it clear once and for all to Vladimir Putin that he has tragically miscalculated by invading Ukraine. And we need to do 3 things. 1, give the Ukrainians the permissions to use the weapons that they already have. And you try explaining to a mutilated Ukrainian soldier why the Ukrainians can't use Storm Shadow missiles to attack the Russian air bases from which they are launching the glide bombs that are doing such appalling damage to their positions in Pokrovsk and elsewhere. You try explaining it to them why they can't do what Putin is doing to their own country. It's not easy, I can tell you. And please, let's not hear any more of this nonsense about the risk of escalation, because that argument was made, I seem to remember, before we gave them the NLAWs, before we gave them the tanks, and the javelins, before we gave them the missiles, and every single time the argument about the risk of escalation from Vladimir Putin was proved to be absolute nonsense, because the guy who actually fears escalation is Putin himself, and we've got to stop using the so-called threat of escalation as an excuse for vacillation. And number 2, we need to show that we're going to outgun the Kremlin financially, and I support Mike Pompeo's idea for a massive lend-lease, $500 trillion lend-lease facility of the kind that the UK had from the United States in the Second World War. The Ukrainians are an extraordinary and brilliant people, and I have no doubt that they will comfortably repay their debt in the decades to come, just as the UK, by the way, continued to pay back the United States for decades. We didn't stop paying lend-lease until the government of Tony Blair. You should know HR. We faithfully paid our debts, and I'm sure that the Ukraine will too. And number 3, we need to give Ukraine the final institutional expression of the geostrategic choice that they have made. They've chosen the West. They've chosen freedom and democracy. And so now is the time, not after the war, to get them into NATO and finally make sense of all those promises that we have made since Budapest in 1994. And this can technically be done under Article 6, because we could admit, I defy all the skeptics, we could admit that territory of Ukraine, which is controlled by Ukraine, and provide to that territory an Article 5 security guarantee without any prejudice to Ukraine's claim to the entirety of its 1991 territory. And it is absolutely critical, in my view, that we make this leap and do this now, because without it, Without that security guarantee, there can be no peace process, there can be no armistice, no negotiation, no talks with Russia that can be remotely credible without a NATO security guarantee. And the great virtue of this solution, getting Ukraine into NATO as fast as possible, is that it brings clarity. St. Paul says, faith, hope, charity, the greatest of these is charity. Well, I think NATO brings faith, hope, and clarity. And the greatest of these is clarity. Clarity for Ukraine about its future. Clarity for the Russians, by the way, about where their boundaries are. And to get back to what Foreign Minister Landsbergis was just saying so brilliantly just now, it's about time that the Russians woke up and smelt the coffee. They need to understand it's over. We've been through this, we in the United Kingdom. We had an empire 7 times bigger than the Roman Empire at its greatest extent under Trajan. We've lost every bit of it. We wouldn't dream of telling any part of our former empire how to run their lives, let alone the United States of America. We would not dream of it. Vladimir Putin, the Russians have got to get used to the idea that they no longer have a sphere of influence. They have no near abroad. There is no more Soviet empire. And there is only one country, in my view, that can make this happen, that can deliver on this agenda, and that is, of course, the United States of America. I want to pay tribute to the United States for everything that it has done, all members of the US Congress have done to support Ukraine. And I hope and pray. I don't know what's going to happen in the US election. I have my ideas, but I don't know. I hope and pray that whoever wins the presidency will have the wisdom and the courage to do the 3 things that I have described. Give Ukraine the military, the financial, and the political assistance it needs to get this war done and get it won. It was a great Republican president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, who first called the Soviet Union an evil empire. And I cannot believe that any American president, Republican or otherwise, is going to allow a Vladimir Putin or anybody else to rebuild that empire and make America weak again. I cannot believe that that can be the outcome. And I believe, on the contrary, if we give the Ukrainians the assistance that they need, help them to succeed, it will be a great day for Ukraine, a great day for the world, and above all, a great day for America. Thank you very much to CEPA. Thank you to all of you for what you're doing to support Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, everybody.